So here we go again. The word hell in the Bible doesn't quite mean what a lot of modern Christians think. Well, Jesus believed in hell, Ken. He mentioned it a lot, so I think we should let the Bible say what it says. So first, Jesus didn't speak English, and there was no word hell in any ancient manuscript of the Bible. That word did not exist until centuries after Jesus. That's not opinion, that's fact. The English word hell collectively represents 4 words, each meaning something a little different. And the English word hell is a Proto-Germanic word adopted from pagan cultures. Second, just as there are many different understandings of the word hell nowadays, there were just as many in the first few centuries of the church. The church has not believed in only one idea of hell for 2,000 years. Anyone that says something like that is ignorant of factual history, period. Early church fathers and mothers understood Hades and Sheol primarily as the intermediate state of the dead, and Tartarus was seen as a place of punishment for the wicked, particularly fallen angels. The idea of an eternal place of torment for the wicked began to take shape more clearly with Augustine in the 4th and 5th centuries and a certain emperor named Justinian in the 6th century, and became a dominant doctrine by the Middle Ages. Now, there's a lot of nuance there with that, which probably deserves its own video, or hey, there's a 3-hour workshop on that if you want to check it out. And third, when someone says we should let the Bible say what it says, they don't really care about letting the Bible say what it says. What they care about is defending their understanding and interpretation of what they've been taught the Bible says and how it props up their biases. Because if they really believed in letting the Bible say what it says, they'd take at least one of the many free classes online on ancient biblical languages to see what the Bible really says. But if they do that, they know they'll be in for surprises. So they don't, which is telling, don't you think? All that aside, in earlier videos, I discussed the words that Jesus used that have been translated as hell, Hades and Gehenna, and what those words actually meant, and how parables like the rich man and Lazarus and the event of Jesus descending into Hades would have been understood by early hearers of the text. And that led to questions about the Hebrew word Sheol, which is the concept of the Hebraic afterlife. So I wanted to dive into that a bit more. So the Hebrew word Sheol is used in the Old Testament around 65 to 66 times, depending on translation. The King James, along with the New King James, is the only major translation that still translates Sheol as hell in the Old Testament. Every other modern translation has moved to a more accurate rendering of the original text, replacing mentions of hell in the Old Testament with the appropriate source word. This is not a progressive or postmodern thing. This is presenting a more accurate translation based upon available ancient texts. But since most folks in the States are more familiar with the King James, I'll mention that the KJV translates Sheol as grave 31 times, hell 31 times, and pit 3 times. Again, however, ancient texts and modern widely used translations do not translate Sheol as hell in the Old Testament, and the Hebrew Bible does not translate Sheol as hell either. Instead of a fiery furnace, which is typically what we think of when we hear the word hell, Sheol refers to the grave, or the domain of the dead. And while the concept of Sheol changes a bit throughout the Old Testament, especially as we get closer to the intertestamental periods, in a nutshell, in the afterlife, Sheol was the place where, after death, all souls went, every single one. And according to Psalm 49, that means good and bad, and righteous and unrighteous, according to Ecclesiastes 9. Sheol was in the bowels of the earth, according to Deuteronomy 32, 1 Samuel 28, Job 26, Psalm 86, Isaiah 7, and Ezekiel 31. Sheol was your destiny, no questions asked, and that's Psalm 49 and 89. Now, I say this a lot. When you're looking at biblical texts, which I do personally believe are divinely inspired, you're looking at a collection of works from different time periods, cultural understandings, and people groups. So yes, there were different ideas of what Sheol actually was. We make a grave mistake. Get it? Grave, Sheol. Okay. When we think that ancient people believed the same exact things we do, and that these beliefs followed a linear path from thousands of years ago to the present day. The religion and beliefs of the ancient Israelites and that of ancient Judaism were very different, just as the early Judaic beliefs of those in the exilic period were different than those under a more Hellenistic influence during Jesus' day. And in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, it is obvious the concept of Sheol changed, or at least the ancients' understanding of Sheol changed. In earliest forms, it appears that there's much in common with the Hebraic idea of Sheol and the afterlife of other Mesopotamian cultures. And like other ancient cultures, Israelites believed in keeping the graves of families and tribes together. So it's inferred that Sheol was the grave of all humanity, like a family tomb of mankind deep in the earth. And, at least early on, in Sheol there was no hate, anger, or work, which is awesome, but the bad part about it is there's no love, knowledge, or wisdom, and that's Ecclesiastes 9. There's no sound, according to Psalm 94 and 115, which also means there's no worship of God, and that's Psalm 6, 30, 88, 115, and Isaiah 38. Job 10, 17, Psalm 88, and 143 say there's no light in Sheol. There's also no memories, according to Psalm 6, 88, and Ecclesiastes 9. In its earliest form, Sheol isn't seen as a place of punishment after death. Psalm 6, Isaiah 38, and Ecclesiastes 9 speak of it as a realm of unconsciousness, of sleeping, of resting with your family. And some biblical writers even believe that the inhabitants of Sheol could be summoned by the living, as when the witch of Endor calls up the spirit of Samuel for Saul. And while it wasn't a pleasurable idea to go to Sheol, sometimes it was considered a better state than life, like in Job 14 or in Genesis 37. And some biblical writers assume the dead were separated from God in Psalm 88 and Isaiah 38, but others believe that God's presence was even in Sheol, as in Psalm 139. Moses said that God's anger burns like a flame in the deepest places of Sheol, and Moses even prays to God to open up Sheol to receive his nemesis Korah alive. Sheol's occupants were mentioned as weak, incorporeal, trembling shades in Job 26, Psalm 88, and Isaiah 14, in realms of darkness, shadows, and dust. And Sheol is personified as a voracious and ravenous beast that swallows the living in Proverbs 1, 27, and Isaiah 5, of which there's no escape. Well, at least until later writers of Isaiah 25 and 26 and Daniel 12, where the writer of Isaiah says that God will one day swallow up death and there will be a resurrection of the dead in the last verses of Isaiah 66. And the writer of Daniel states the faithful will be rewarded with everlasting life, while the rest will experience eternal contempt. Now, that shift is really important, especially if you ascribe to the scholarly consensus of this portion of Isaiah 25 and 26, reaching its final form in the 6th to 5th centuries BC, Isaiah 66 in the 5th century, and the evidence that Daniel was written in the 2nd century about a 6th century event. Because what we're seeing is that there is a major shift concerning what actually goes down in Sheol, especially after the return of the Jewish priesthood from exile and the establishment of Jerusalem as the center of the Jewish faith. And soon this afterlife concept develops depth with those ruled by conceit and the unjust, the improperly buried, and those that are unclean. They just endure pure misery in Sheol, while those who die in God's graces are reunited with their families in Sheol, aka the bosom of Abraham. And that's reflected and taken a step further in the apocryphal book of Maccabees, this belief of Jewish martyrs who died expecting that after our death in this fashion, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will receive us, and all our forefathers will praise us. And that's in 4 Maccabees 13. And as time went on during the intertestamental period, Jewish apocalyptic pieces of literature really began to expound on this concept of afterlife even more, taking readers on a journey of what lies beyond, which I discussed in the video about Hades and Gehenna. So when it comes to the Old Testament use of Sheol, it sure as heck doesn't fit the picture of what we've been taught of as hell. And in fact, we see there was an agreement between writers as to what Sheol actually was, and that was a huge bone of contention between the Sadducees and Pharisees, aka the Jewish priesthood, who disagreed on resurrection and the afterlife itself. So that's Sheol in the Old Testament, not so much fire and flame as a shadowy, silent abode of the dead, where all souls, regardless of their moral conduct, reside in a state of quiet and darkness. So we've covered 3. I'm going to do a video on Tartarus soon, and that video is going to open up a whole can of worms, for it's the place of imprisoned fallen angels and really opens a lot of stuff into the book of Enoch. So we'll take a look at that. So God bless. See you soon.